Today's presentation is a legacy of the struggle for Soviet Jewry, and we have two wonderful individuals, two of my personal heroes with us today, Ephraim Kholmyansky and Glenn Richter. And I'm going to do a fuller introduction in just one moment, but I want to, the story for me is very personal, as a way of introduction, for me, where this story began was in my high school years. I was at a Soviet Jewry rally in 1995 at Faneuil Hall in the Boston area, and I was there with school actually, and in the crowd was my great uncle, my Uncle Sam. And I was like, Uncle Sam, what are you doing here? I said, I'm so happy to see you. What are you doing here? And he had a picture of this guy named Sasha Alexander Kholmyansky. And he said, I'm here to protest on behalf of Soviet Jewry. And I said, great, so am I. And I said, what sign do you have? He said, this person is our cousin. I said, what are you talking about? And what I found out from my Uncle Sam, and I have actually the letter right here, Sasha, that I found in my files, Ephraim, from, I think, your uncle, Ilya. This is from 1965, that your uncle wrote to my uncle, and this is in Cyrillic, it's in Russian. My Uncle Sam had the letter translated, and it was the first correspondence between our family, and I believe at that point, 60 years. 20 years later, I had the really distinct pleasure of traveling to what was at that point the Soviet Union, and being reunited. Hold on, here's the fact sheet, but that's not as important. Here's a letter that I wrote to every member of the Senate, but that's not important. This is what's important, is that 20 years later, actually, it would have been 80 years since any member of our family had met one another. The man right over here is Ephraim Kholmyansky, one of our presenters today, and the guy in the middle is me, and I still have that shirt, by the way. And this is Ephraim's brother Michael and his mother Rosa, and father Gregory, his wife Anna, and his daughter Dorit, who I had the pleasure of meeting. His daughter Dora, who I had a pleasure of meeting just a few days after she was born. And it was really, was one of the most special experiences I've ever had in my life. So Ephraim Kholmyansky is was a prisoner of Zion and a Jewish activist, and was the leader of the biggest underground project of the Soviet Jewry era. Arrested in 1984 for fabricated charges of illegal firearms possession, he kept a prolonged hunger strike while held in a punishment cell. His case sparked major international solidarity campaign, and in Israel, once he arrived in Israel after the fall of the Iron Curtain, Ephraim has worked for the Ministry of Education and served as the CEO of the Zionist Forum in Givot Olam, an Israeli oil exploration and production company. Our other presenter today is another one of my heroes. As Ephraim was fighting for Jewish rights in the Soviet Union, on this side of the Atlantic was Glenn Richter, who I met when I was in high school. And Glenn transitioned from involvement in the American Civil Rights Movement to help found the Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry, the SSSJ, to which he dedicated 26 years until the collapse of the Soviet Union, the USSR. The SSSJ became a powerful force for positive, assortive change in the American Jewish community, demonstrating, lobbying, and creating media attention for the welfare of fellow Jews. So on a personal level, I'm humbled to welcome you both here today. And I know that we'll have a wonderful conversation about the legacy of the struggle for Soviet Jewry. Let me begin with Ephraim and ask Actually, let me begin with maybe to build off what I mentioned earlier. When you started your process to leave the USSR to go to Israel, and now years later we talk to you in Israel. What's your thoughts? What's your big thought? And I guess my question is, do you believe in miracles?
That's correct. I think everyone wonders from time to time if there are miracles during our lifetime, the way we read about them, say in ancient Egypt, 33 centuries ago. It's so detached from us. Could we point to something that we experience in our lifetime? And I think that the saga of the Soviet Jewry, the Grand Exodus, not heard of since possibly that original Exodus from the ancient Egypt, is a vivid example of the contemporary miracle. So I'm so glad to participate, to have been part of it. And I'm a witness.
I think you're a lot more than a witness. Let me ask, what was Jewish life like behind the Iron Curtain, and what inspired you to want to leave?
You know that story is described best by Elie Wiesel, who visited the former USSR in 1964-65, and depicted a gloomy picture that there is a rapid assimilation of the Soviet Jewry, no future, no framework for the Jewish existence there. And he published in 1965 his book named
Jews of Silence.
Jews of Silence, because their voice has not been heard and possibly could not be ever. That was behind. That was before the 6-Day War, and the brilliant Israeli victory in 6-Day War changed the Jewish self-perception in the USSR greatly. So people stopped feeling that being Jewish is sort of a chronic disease, is a stigma. You could see the lighting in the eyes of the people. It's so good to be the part of it. It's so good to be Jewish. My personal story starts with the high school when I enrolled into a prestigious high school in Moscow to find that half of our schoolmates are Jewish like me. And it was at that age when people ask eternal questions about the meaning of life, and definitely about Jewish subjects. What's the reason we are being and have been hated for millennia? Maybe something wrong with us, or maybe some other reason. Maybe we are unique, sort of a ugly duckling. And if we've been so hated for millennia, why we survived? Not everybody. We suffered much losses, but as a people, we have survived. Maybe there is a special force, I would call it a divine force, that protects us. It gives the meaning to our existence. And as a people who have a mission here, and as a person, I am and want to be part of this grand mission. And what my life would be devoted to here in the USSR, to strengthen this country, which hates us, which looks at us as sort of a mineral resources like natural gases, like oil. Should I devote my entire life to that? No. And I thought, well, maybe a miracle. We started to think about miracles happen. And when it happens, the heavy doors of the USSR would open, the Iron Curtain will show us the way out. And I could get out. Where to? Oh, yes, to this tiny place, a mere peck in the ocean of Arabs. What a life would be there. But I have to get prepared to learn English. We never thought about Hebrew at that time, to acquire a profession. And I started my long story. It took a decade before I found the Jewish life in Moscow really organized. And the most fascinating part of it was for me the groups for learning and teaching Hebrew. It was high prestigious occupation, not free of problems and threats from the KGB, the Soviet secret police, having the Jewish department. We've been the only people of all the peoples populated the USSR who had a special department, the KGB. And I started to learn Hebrew. It was fascinating part of the story. I moved very fast. And in a year's time, I discovered that all our activity basically contained to two major metropolitan cities, Moscow and Leningrad, whereas the Jews are bulk of the Jewish population is dispersed among tens of different cities across this giant country. And among these cities are well-known traditional Jewish names like Minsk, like Kiev, Odessa, and there is nothing whatsoever there. And I thought that would be a great challenge to replicate our activities we have in Moscow to these cities. And it was utterly dangerous. It was exactly what the KGB, the Jewish department of the KGB, would like to prevent. So could we allow ourselves the luxury not to do it? I thought we have a moral obligation to do whatever it's possible, whatever the chances. Sometimes a person doesn't make cold the calculations of the chances of success versus the problems and chances of failure. Sometimes we need to do what it is needed to be done. The project will have to be an underground one. It was my decision from the very beginning. And we started the four people, my elder brother, myself, one person who is a very famous now minister in the Israeli government, Yulia Edelstein, and the fourth, which is less famous, but also very, very important, late Yuri Kosherovsky. That was the team that started the project. In a year, I became the project leader. And the chances to succeed in such a project were bleak. Who was our adversary? Just imagine the KGB with all the enormous machinery, unlimited resources, human resources, financial resources, everything at their disposal. And we're just a handful of Jewish activists. Could we proceed? We should proceed. And we started. It was enormous blessing. During my already many years here in this world, I participated in many different initiatives, and most of them didn't have the blessing. I know the difference very clearly. That was a real blessing. Just somehow we found the right people in right places. Don't forget, we had no communication. There is no way to give a call to anybody. No way even to send a letter. The apartments are tapped. And instead of talking, you are writing. For years, we couldn't have the luxury to talk out loud about this project, only writing. We found the right people. We have managed to develop the special intensive training, which succeeded very much. We found a way to store the information and to store the teaching and other materials about Israel, Jewish history, everything. And my feeling was it couldn't happen, but it did. It had. You asked me about the KGB. Definitely KGB gradually started to find the traces of the major underground activities. Thank God they failed to understand the true dimensions of our efforts. And even that they have found was sufficient for them to threaten me with the show trial. That's the term from the time of Stalin, when a show trial was a trial with a very bad outcome, mostly capital punishment. And it was a show trial because it was turned into a show. It had the enormous coverage, media coverage. And that's why to intimidate the others. So the KGB told me there will be a show trial. And the pressure on myself mounted at a certain stage. It was already in 1984, 4 years after we started. Just imagine, we managed to operate 4 years under their nose. I understood that I have to do something about the continuation of the project. Already 2 of my closest friends and we may say partners in the project gained a real experience understanding how the project has to be run. And we decided that if something happens to me, they will split my position, my role between themselves. And indeed, I was arrested 3 months later. It was July 1984, where I was with a small group of my students in the Baltic region. Now it's independent country, small dependent country, Estonia. I was taken to the prison in the city of Tallinn. And my first charge was symbolic. I understood that something is going to happen. And one day I was taken to the new interrogator team. They came from Moscow, and the chief interrogator told me that there was a house search in my apartment in Moscow, and they found the handgun and cartridges in my room that I shared, the apartment I shared with my parents. And I immediately understood that that's the major first step in the direction of the show trial. They want to portray us as criminals. And they planted weapons as a most logical step. They want to portray us as criminals that under the guise of cultural activity, Hebrew, other things, Jewish legacy, are stockpiling weapons, definitely practicing, definitely have other sinister plans. And I understood that they are trying to ruin everything, to ruin my project that I created. Everybody in the Jewish movement knew me either personally or knew about me. So it will be a major blow to the entire Jewish movement in the USSR. And I simply cannot bear it. So what could I do? There's only one thing that a prisoner could do, hoping for the better outcome. And it is a hunger strike. So I declared an open-end hunger strike, taken to the deputy warden of the prison, Major Kolk. And Kolk told me, you will go to the punishment cell. Unruly criminals are punished there, normally for several days. The law allows us up to 15 days in the punishment cell. But you will be kept there indefinitely and get out of the cell under two possible outcomes. Either if you stop a hunger strike or you die. And I want to show you something. Do you see it?
No,
No.
not yet.
No, I don't. Where
You
is
have
what?
to share screen.
At the moment, share screen. No.
Here we go.
So this is the prison. No, you don't see it.
There we go.
Yes, we can see now.
This is the prison. And this is the inside the cell. And this is the cot, the bed inside the punishment cell. It's locked. It's impossible to use it. It's impossible to lie down. There is nowhere to sit down as well. You see a strange object in front of us. It's impossible to sit on it. So a person put in the punishment cell is put in the very harsh conditions. And they expect me to break down quickly. The deputy warden in a couple of days told me, you know, we decided not to take as a face value your declaration of the open-end hunger strike. There's nothing without an end. We will bring you your meals, not the poor ration of the punishment cell, the better, the richer meals from the regular cell, as if you had not committed anything. What have I committed? And they bring 3 times a day the meals put on the floor. It's definitely a major temptation for the person on hunger strike. And they would watch it definitely if I touch it. I will not give them this pleasure. The day 16th of the hunger strike, I'm taken to a new office, an office of the doctor. There is an officer standing and reading formally from the sheet of paper, according to the rules of the prison. On the day 16th of the hunger strike, start force feeding. Look here, he said, you will be handcuffed to prevent your physical resistance. This is the special tool, the gag that forces the jaws open. Sorry for the details. This will put this another one, will push down the tongue. This will be put into your throat in order to enable the feeding tube go smoothly all the way to the stomach. You will not be able to vomit. You will still suffer. You will. I told him it's just another type of abuse. I will not resist physically, but I will not take any meals voluntarily. The time drags little by little. It's very difficult. I will not describe all the details of the hunger strike. They are written in my book that is going to be published in a couple of months, hopefully. Specifically, I will tell you only about internal dialogue. It was very difficult moments sometimes, and I recall my internal dialogue. I'm telling myself, I cannot hold the hunger strike anymore. It's already so many weeks. And I reply to myself, oh, that's correct. You did a wonderful job, but it's like a war. Every single hour you continue it, it's like a blow to the enemy. Could you please continue for another hour? And then another hour, and then another hour, and yet another hour. We're already at the end of November, starting on September 13th, close to 2.5 months of a hunger strike. Again, our interrogator came to me. He used to come even before several times, and each time it reiterated the same charge, and I reiterated my protests, fabricated charge. But this time, I have a subtle feeling that something has changed in his behavior. He said, 2 messages to you, 2 tests had been done to the pistol. First, forensic test, the fingerprints, and it has been concluded that there are no fingerprints of the sufficient quality to identify the person who was holding the pistol. I'm listening, unable to comprehend. Oh, please say it again. You didn't forge my fingerprints? Just as simple as that. So you're unable to implement your initial plan. So there are new forces joined our struggle in this arena. Maybe these are our friends. Solidarity campaign in the West, together with the divine protection, along with my hunger strike. That's a turning point. But he interrupts my thoughts and continue. The second test, the ballistic test, determined that the pistol was in the working order, but there is no way to determine when it was used, in what circumstances. Oh, I understand, I'm telling myself. You want to say that it was used and somebody was killed and you want to indict me? Oh, no. Now I understand he won't be able to do it. Maybe it was the part of the initial plan, but now we are starting to win. And indeed, I continued the hunger strike for quite a while. At such a state, I was brought to the trial, and it was not a show trial. And instead of 5 or 7 years behind the bars as they threatened, I got a record low of 1.5 years. Let's see. Oh,
So let's pause here for one moment, Ephraim. I'd like to, if you can, I want to turn our attention to Glenn Richter on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Before we get you back to Israel, hold on, if you can stop sharing your screen, Glenn, because there's another side of the story, right? Is the activists here in America, or actually really in North America and throughout the world. So Glenn, before we connect your two stories, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the solidarity movement overall.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Savinor and the Park Avenue Synagogue for inviting Ephraim and myself into your homes. And I recall that 2 years ago, many synagogue members visited Russia and got a glimpse into the current Jewish situation there. What Ephraim and I are talking about is how we got to that point. My own involvement in the Soviet Jewry movement began as a political science major at Queens College in the early and mid 1960s. I was active in the New York branch of SNCC, the Student Then Nonviolent Coordinating Committee civil rights organization. In early 1963, I read a remarkable article in Foreign Affairs magazine about the oppressive state of Soviet Jews. No one I knew had previously assembled any of that information. What I didn't know at that point was that the author, Moshe Richter, was a front man for Israel's secret Soviet Jewry office called the Lishka, or the Liaison Bureau. The Lishka had been operating since 1952 to covertly connect with Soviet Jews. A group of us students, several in the civil rights movement, coalesced around Jacob Birnbaum. His famed grandfather, Nathan Birnbaum, was the person who coined the term Zionism. Jacob's father was able to get his family out of Nazi Germany to England. And after the war, Jacob helped rescue Jews from North Africa and assisted survivors of Nazi and Soviet camps. Realizing that about a quarter of world Jewry was trapped in the USSR, Jacob moved to the US, where he felt more pressure could be exerted on the Kremlin than from Europe. On April 27, 1964, 150 of us students met at Columbia University. We really knew very few details about Soviet Jews' situation. Mostly they were largely denied matzah. For Passover, almost all synagogues were closed, no Jewish schools, and the active legacy of Stalin's anti-Semitism. But we resolved to demonstrate 4 days hence on May Day at the Soviet mission on East 67th Street, not that far from your synagogue. After nonstop organizing, seemingly miraculously, almost 1,000 students marched for 4 hours at the mission. We were amazed to see a page 2 article and photo on our protest in the next morning's New York Times. We had marched in silence to reflect the silence forced on Soviet Jews, but immediately realized that it was a mistake never to be repeated. There was a large cadre of young Jews whose hearts were with the American Civil Rights Movement, but this was an era that most didn't speak out, at least publicly. So here we suddenly had a civil rights cause of our own, for our own Jewish brethren, and the dam of self-restraint began to burst. A movement spread from New York and across the country, involving the spectrum of young Jews, from observant to secular. 2 years later, Elie Wiesel's riveting, groundbreaking recollection of his visit, The Jews of Silence, which Ephraim mentioned, propelled us even more to action. He ended his book with a challenge. Were the Jews of silence only our brothers and sisters in Russia, or rather the complacent Western Jews among whom he lives today? Then 2 years later, in 1968, Arthur Moss's While 6 Million Died, a sensational expose of the effective paralysis of most American and free European Jews during the Holocaust, just ripped the skin off the scab. Morse's book came 1 year after the Six-Day War, in which the very existence of a reborn state of Israel hung in perilous balance. Israel's miraculous victory stirred, as Ephraim mentioned, increasing number of Soviet Jews, despite the Kremlin's unmitigated anti-Israel hate. Beginning in 1968, it trickled in a torrent of Russian Jews began to publicly demand their right to emigrate to the historic Jewish homeland. Within the USSR, an underground Zionist movement began to spread outwards from the Baltics. And 2 years after that, in 1970, 14 Jews and 2 non-Jews planned to take over a small Soviet biplane, flying a route near the Soviet-Finnish border and fly it to freedom under the radar. Of course, the KGB knew the whole plan and arrested them before they even touched that little aircraft. But the Kremlin's attempt at a Leningrad show trial blew up in their faces. We and waves of like-minded Jews and non-Jews marched and protested and lobbied in the US, Israel, and Europe. So instead of being intimidated, thousands of Soviet Jews began the perilous attempt to apply for immigration. On the student side here in the US, we inspired many young Jews to speak out for a Jewish cause, creatively demonstrated, lobbied in Congress, published loads of information, briefed tourists to the USSR to meet Soviet Jews, and created twinning programs. We were now part of a movement which involved a broad spectrum of American Jewry, young and old, right to left, religious and politically.
I can verify for everybody that Glenn lives and breathes this, because on the way home from shul the other day, my son, who recently wrote a report for history about Soviet Jewry, you guys were embroiled in a really passionate conversation about this. It's really so moving for me. I'd like to take a moment, though, to connect the stories, the activism that was here, and Ephraim's experience in the USSR. So when did you first hear about him? And then what'd you do about it?
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me get to my
Thank you
notes.
so much. I appreciate that when my questions are good too.
That was great questions. Okay. We first heard about Alexander Sasha Ephraim Kholmyansky in the early 1980s, involved in the very dangerous work. And I think for everything he said, he is underplaying the incredible job that he did. The very dangerous work of establishing a widespread underground Hebrew teaching network. Let me show you a few items with Ellie, if you could give a hand, from our SSJ archives after Ephraim's 1984 arrest, showing activity on his behalf. So Ellie, could you please show number 1, 001?
Yes. Can you guys see it?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
We see your screen with the stuff, but we don't see
Upper left, on the upper left.
Okay. Give me 1 second. All right, here we are.
Great. Okay, can you move it down, please?
Yes.
Very good.
How's that?
Excellent. Okay, oops. I see it on the side of my screen. Okay, I'll tell you what it is. It's a letter from 2 members of Congress to then Soviet leader Chernenko for Ephraim and other arrested Hebrew teachers. So that was one of the results of the lobbying effort. Okay, could you please show number 2? That's the yellow sheet, the gold sheet.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, that's our news release about the end of Ephraim's hunger strike in the gulag, which still to me remains an incredible act of bravery. Of course, obviously, it took some effort to get that information out, but that's part of a continuing story. Okay, could you please show Ellie number 5?
Yes. Number 5.
005. Okay, very good. Okay, that's an appeal brought to Israel by 2 released refuseniks on behalf of Ephraim's wife in Moscow, who began a hunger strike to obtain exit visas to Israel. Okay, and could you kindly show, look, here we go, yeah. Okay, let's bring it up.
You're muted, Glenn. Actually, you're not muted
And
anymore.
Okay, back I am. That's not the KGB, that was spam. Okay, this is a good example. These are carbon copies. And when obviously there were very few Xerox machines around. So when Soviet Jews began to write either their underground literature, the samizdat, or send out appeals. They would type carbon copies after carbon copies, but getting hold of the carbon paper itself was difficult. Every typewriter had to be registered. So this was a major job in itself, things we don't even think about. Okay, Ellie, if you could kindly show number 7, 007.
We like 007.
Right. Okay, very good. This is an appeal by Ephraim's refusenik friends at the time of his arrest by the KGB. And again, this was not typed, of course, in Moscow. It was typed out in the West, but it was brought out on, I guess, some very thin or carbon copy or whatever it was, but it was smuggled out and it was retyped over here. Okay, Ellie, if you could kindly show the prisoner of conscience, prisoner of Soviet secret police poster.
Sure. Give me 1 second. Which number is that?
Hey, that was the link, not the number.
Yes.
Okay, meanwhile, while you're bringing it up, Ephraim showed a photo of a demonstration, of actually a rally at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, one of the Solidarity Days. And you saw, if you recall, many faces there. Among the faces that were in many of these rallies was that of Sasha Alexander Kholmyansky, prisoner of the Soviet secret police. So we carried this around. And by the way, for those of you who were in Moscow at the Jewish Museum in Moscow, incredibly, that museum had some of our SSJ prisoner posters. I have no idea why they did it, but it's a testament to the fact that even in Moscow, the Jewish Museum over there had such kind of posters. Okay, and
So if I can say one thing, Glenn, hold on, keep the image up for 1 second, Ellie. That's the poster my Uncle Sam had at Faneuil Hall in Boston in 1985.
Okay, that's it. Okay, and the last one, Ellie, if you could kindly show number 9, 009. I just give you, again, before you bring it up, this is just an idea of people who visited the Soviet Union to meet refuseniks, either brought in material, brought in hopefully a little bit of hope, and hopefully also brought out information. So what you're going to see, whoops, no, 009. Okay, I'll tell you who it's going to be. It's a woman who traveled to the Soviet Union, a woman named Rose Ann Tendler Worth from the US, and she was visiting Ephraim's brother and sister-in-law in Moscow. And these foreign visitors really were a lifeline. They were a lifeline because, again, we got stuff in and they got stuff out. Not always successfully either way. Here we are. Okay. And by the way, the person in the back, if you can see, all the way in the background, a little indistinct, a little photo. Ephraim, am I correct? That's Yuli. That's Yuli Edelstein.
That's Yuli.
Yuli Edelstein, right? Another one of the Hebrew teachers. Okay. So I finished with my response.
Well, it was great. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm just looking at the clock, okay? Here are the questions I'd like us to answer. Ephraim, take us from your release to being able to go to Israel. And then I think we should really talk about the legacy of the legacy of Soviet Jewry and how it's remembered today for you and Glenn. But first, let's bring you home.
Okay. It was still not, it was after my release from the prison, we still were not able to make an aliyah for a couple of years. Those years was also the next part of the struggle. But finally, we arrived. That's what we saw on the previous slide. We will not return to it anymore. Next day I'm taken to the news, the TV host asks the question, don't you have any apprehension that the real Israel is different from the dream? She said that you struggled to fought for this country so much. Don't you think that the reality will be so different? I didn't answer what I wanted, and I wanted to say that indeed we understand the difference between the dream and reality. I want to keep both. The dream is the ideal that brings us forward, that gives us the way to go. It should not be mixed with the reality. Reality has all kinds of challenges, and we came to Israel. We want to become the part of this historic movement. We want to make this country stronger and better.
Well, I know on our end of the on our side of the Atlantic, you know, having visited you and other people in the former USSR, it was amazing when we got the news that you landed in Israel. And I have a letter over here from your nephew, also my cousin, who wrote to us from Jerusalem, and it was amazing. It was these are things that happen in other times, you know. And many people here today have written about their experiences of going on the marches and, you know, wearing, you know, the bracelets, you know, the solidarity bracelets. So maybe for Glenn and then for Ephraim, where is the memory of the Soviet Jewry movement today?
Okay, that's a very, very, very strong and serious matter. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So one of the things I miss most about the Soviet Jewry movement was the sense of shared purpose among the most disparate spectrum of Jews and with non-Jews of goodwill. I got to meet folks who were still friends from across the US and Canada, and then in Europe and in Israel. After we had helped force open the Kremlin's iron doors, one of my greatest thrills was to attend one of the very first legal gatherings of Soviet Jews in early 1991 in Moscow, then fly on the very first official El Al flight from Moscow to Israel, arriving in time for Saddam Hussein's Scud missile war. But that's just 3 years after Rabbi Weiss led a group of us demonstrating for our brethren in Red Square, just outside the Kremlin walls. And that's a whole nother story. But contrasted with the thousands of books and films and plays and other documentation of the Holocaust in hundreds of centers where we lost big time, there's very little which documents the movement which freed nearly 2 million Soviet Jews. We've somehow frozen by our own success. Our student struggle for Soviet Jewry archives are at Yeshiva University. Jerry Goodman helped create a Soviet Jewry archives at the Center for Jewish History on West 16th Street. There are archives in Israel. There are a few dozen books, as in the upcoming one by Ephraim. There are several websites. And there's talk of even a museum in Israel devoted to the movement. But the real takeaway is that the solidarity and success of the Soviet Jewry movement, for all its internal tensions, doesn't have to be a one-time fluke. What unites us can be much stronger than what divides us, especially on Israel. And I really pray that we have the fortitude and patience to do just that.
Do you have anything to add, Ephraim, about this?
My feeling is not especially optimistic about this story. It's going down into oblivion and fast. At certain stage, maybe it was due to the abrupt changes in the USSR, due to new leader, Mr. Gorbachev, and it was perceived in the West by the media primarily that it was due to his good heart that just a liberal person came to power, opened the doors, and everything that preceded was of no sense. I think it's a very shallow understanding of the things. I think our common joint struggle was one of the major factors that influenced his decisions, and he was basically trapped. He needed to change the things. His internal reforms all proved unsuccessful, and he needed to do something. So he opened up to the Western demands. Mr. Schultz and the President Reagan was adamant on this issue, but that was not only their personal mission. They felt it because it was part of the general mind, because it became integral part of the human rights case, and was achieved by our common struggle. Now, I think the next challenge is to preserve it and to make it as a part of the new experience, not just to see the old-fashioned documents and to say, let bygone be bygone, to build a curriculum on the basis of this thing, because it's unique, it's a really miracle. How could we disregard being part of the miracle? How could not be able to transfer it to the next generation? I think we all need to try to think, let it be a museum or something, less than a museum. This should be presented to the new generation in the way that the reader, the student could be carried away, because there is something very strong about it, very strong. It's not an artificial thing that we just imagined. It was real. We felt it, we did it, we were part of it. The little part of that I'm personally doing, the book that will hopefully be published soon. I published the Hebrew version, I published the Russian version. I prepared a small website. I'm invited to tell this story like I'm telling you this story, primarily in Israeli schools and the army. Whenever I'm invited, I'm going. Used to be the time when it was more fashionable. I traveled the 3 continents telling this story. No more. I think it should be, I think I'm trying to prepare some sort of education materials on the basis of it to make it the part of the curriculum. Let it be the part, say, of Sunday school. So let your synagogue champion this case. As always, somebody have to be the leader to initiate something. Others will follow suit.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it'd be great to find a home for the museum. It's an amazing, miraculous chapter in Jewish history that moved many of us. There are some beautiful comments in the chat about going to the demonstrations and the bracelets, and also Tybal has on her screen image is a solidarity necklace that she has. Thank you for sharing that with us here today, Glenn. I see. Yeah, please.
Okay. Ephraim, you may know this. The daughter of two of the people involved in that doomed 1970 attempt to take a Soviet plane, but who really became one of the greatest heroes, two of the greatest heroes, Silva Zalmanson and Edward Kuznetsov. The daughter, Anat Zalmanson Kuznetsov, who's a filmmaker in Israel, has created curriculum which is available in English, and it was created with the help of Bar-Ilan University in Israel. So those who want later on can get the link to that and see some of the material. But I think what Ephraim is saying is absolutely correct. We just somehow we can't deal with success. As Jews, we're so used to, what's wrong with us? We won, But I think people should indeed be taking a look at the material prepared, excellent material prepared from Anat Zalmanson Kuznetsov.
It looks like Vera has a question. Yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself, Vera, and then we'll go to the wrap up. Yeah.
This is an extraordinary story, and I'm thinking back to when Hitler came to power. There was a period early on when he allowed the Jews to leave if they so choose to do so. I'm wondering, what did the Soviet Union get out of not allowing the Jews to leave? In other words, why didn't they just say, go? You don't want to be here? You don't love us? Go, leave. What was their benefit to the country to keep Jews, the Soviet Jews, from leaving?
Yes, Jews were very highly educated and very motivated part of the workforce. That's why what I started to tell you at the beginning. They regarded us like sort of mineral resources. And when Gorbachev finally, by his will, against his will, opened the doors, was a major brain drain, enormous brain drain. What I've lost is an immeasurable thing.
One of the things that I also heard, Ephraim. Yeah, Glenn, please.
Okay. From the Western side, you have to realize that all the Soviet propaganda. This is the socialist paradise, is the best place in the world. Exactly. And these people are saying it's not the socialist paradise. They want to escape. This was just like, the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, that's what I had heard when I was growing up, is that part of it is, letting 1 million, 2 million people go, highly educated people. What does that say about your country? I have a file from way back when. It's really fascinating. This is this I got from the Soviet Council before my trip. It was all the 100 questions you want to know about the USSR. This is also fascinating. It's Fodor's 1987, the Soviet Union. It is like reading 1984 by George Orwell. It is another world. I have a lot of other stuff. I also have an advanced copy of Ephraim's book, which, by the way, is really fantastic, and I highly recommend it when it comes out. But I want to, I'd like to wrap up. We're coming to that time, and I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, to Ephraim and to Glenn, thank you for being here today, and your story, your memory is an inspiration to all of us. But I want to say something equally important to those of us who are still here, which is, if you were inspired by this story, tell it to somebody else, right? Especially to our children, our grandchildren. Tell it to somebody else. This is, it's a story, it's a success, and in many cases, life went on, right? There were new stories and new challenges for us to face. But the story of the refuseniks, is, I've said many times, is not just that they were refused an exit visa. I believe they refused to give up, and that's my little midrash on the name, is that what you, Ephraim, did. And I have pictures of, I had the pleasure of sitting at one of your Hebrew lessons, and even with my day school education, your Hebrew was a lot better than me. It actually motivated me to take Hebrew a lot more seriously when I got home. But there are people here today, the memory of Dorothy Hirsch. I'd like to give her a shout out, who was involved in
Absolutely.
Thank you,
the
Rabbi.
Committee for
Absolutely.
Concerned
Committee of
Scientists.
Concerned Scientists.
That means a lot.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yes.
A
And we
great
have
lady.
Enid Wortman here today, who's been a partner in this enterprise. And Carol Kext is here. Carol's papers are also part of the collection at the American Jewish Historical Society. And I'd like to just, wrap up with, Ephraim, you talked about Israel being, is it the dream or the reality, and which one is better? In many ways, Israel will always be in that struggle. And I know that as missiles are flying in your area, not necessarily to Male Adumim, but in other areas, especially where members of your family live, we want you to know that we're thinking about you and we stand with you like we did 40 years ago, 40 years plus. We stand with you and on a personal level, really sending you a lot of love. So, friends, please pray for Israel, pray for peace. And remember, when we go to this week's Torah portion, which is Parshat Naso, which is about the census, it never talks about numbers. It actually talks about raising people's heads up and seeing their humanity. And the Soviet Jewry movement reminded us that humanity will never be kept down, and made that inspiration for the value of every single life be one that we hold close to our hearts and use it as a North Star for the road ahead. Glenn and Ephraim, again, thank you so much for your presentation today, and we can't wait to welcome you back to Park Avenue Synagogue.
Thank you very, very much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure, Fred. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to
Thank you
see
very much.
everybody. Great job, Ephraim, Glenn.
So, thank you very much for compressing a lot into a little bit of time.
Oh, we
That's
did
pretty
it. We did it.
incredible. We did it.
Really, it was fantastic.